Hey everybody, it's Rachel.
And Kirk.
And Bugs. And Goldie at the Mobile Memorial. And we are at Mount... What was it called, babe?
Mount Sandy?
No.
Mount Tilla.
Mount Tilla. That's what it is. Mount Tilla Baptist Church? Baptist Church. And right back there, on the other side of those pines, is where Goldie got sideswiped by the semi-truck when we were on our journey from Savannah to Atlanta, pushing 250 miles for our causes. So we're here with our vigil and a little visual message. As usual, we're trying to stop in each community, and this is right outside Dublin in Nicholsville community. Nicholsville community. There's a lot of names we're trying to remember. In any event, we were doing a news broadcast, and we've stopped to talk to a lot of people along the way. We had to do some service work and maintenance work, the flowers and the van, and so here we are actually at a memorial grave site here at the church. So we are going to do our memorial dedication, and if you're listening in or will be listening in and you would like to unite with us in thought and in spirit about those who we are vigiling for, you can do so according to your own faith, and we will agree with you. So for all those who have been experiencing or who have endured traumatic violations throughout their life or last night, whether it be domestic violence, sexual assault, childhood maltreatment and neglect, elder abuse, spiritual abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, attempted murder during traumatic violation, again, mentioned ritual abuse, elder abuse. Whether you've endured any of these or are currently enduring any of these, we want you to know that we remember you, and we are remembering you right now as we continue to vigil throughout each community. And this goes for the Scots community, the community in Eden, which we tried to vigil there, and we did vigil there, but we weren't able to get it all live because there were signal issues. Very strong. There was a really bad signal issue, but we do understand from what we were told that a lot of people have left Eden. That was a thriving, bustling community when I went pushing through. Oh, sorry, Arden. I keep saying Eden. Arden. When I pushed through in 2008, and now it's almost desolate. Even the schools are fenced in. You can't even access any of the schools. The police department is down to 2 cars, and I don't even know if they were active. It's really almost a ghost town there now. It's amazing what 10 years will do. But actually, the truth of what happened, we asked one of the residents there who was walking by, and the truth of what happened is meth. That's it, drugs. And addiction is something that will kill an entire community, not just the individuals within it. So we saw firsthand in 10 years what can happen to a community that gets inundated by addiction and gets basically destroyed by addiction. So pretty much, I guess some of the old timers are still there and trying to hang on to the community, but some of the younger people are being pulled away by drugs and prison sentences. So we really want to, say a strong prayer for Arden and that community, and then the Scots community, and East Dublin, and now, of course, West Dublin, and this area, this community here, which is the Kingsley community, and Wilson County, and Wilkinson County, and Lawrence County. So Lawrence County was Dublin too. So, but all of you, we just want you to know somehow, some way. And that's why we're doing this virtual, visual, what do you call this? Viral memorial, right? From one community to the next. We want you to know that there are people out here who are listening. Janine, there you are again, our good and faithful vigiler. Vigil. Good and faithful vigiler. We appreciate you so much. You have to forgive us. Our fibromyalgia is really acting up in this weather, and part of that is foggy memory and foggy thoughts. So if we seem to be prolonged, our apologies. At least we're under a tree trying to get some shade in this heat. So back to all those who are struggling through their traumatic violation. The message for this particular path and this particular part of the journey is that even when traumatic things happen to you, like being sideswiped by a semi-truck, that's kind of like, somebody impacting you with traumatic violation in our real world, that is in our daily life. And I still had to push on. Like, it could have killed me. It could have pulverized the wagon and made it useless, but it didn't. And when we're traumatized and we survive violation, we may come out damaged and harmed and needing great repair even, but our journey isn't over. And if we take the time for restoration, which I did, I took 4 days afterwards to try to regroup and repair the wagon and mend. And this beautiful church here had given me a screwdriver so I could make it another 17 miles down the road, which we'll get to that point when we get to Wickinson.
Well, Wickinson, that's right.
Wickinson.
You said it correctly.
Wickinson down the street, which I could barely move past. But in any event, the message is that you make time for restoration. It's part of the journey. Remember that. Like, that's the whole pivotal key. Like, when you're down and you're taking, like, you feel like you're wasting time, you're not wasting time. That time is actually part of the journey. It's just not a planned part. And sometimes it's important to plan it so you don't feel as bad when it happens. But it is part of the journey. If you don't make room for restoration and just surrender to it when you're in it, if that period of time is called depression and you're rebounding from depression, or if that period of time is a triggering moment and you need 30 minutes to get yourself together, that's okay. You can take that time. It's actually part of the journey. And you never know, in your process of getting support for that time, or in your need to just unplug, what new insight and what new information may come along during that time, and who you might meet, and what purpose you're serving in that moment. Like, I talk about these hills. I don't know if you can see them from here, but they have, you climb and then you go downhill. Do you see something? You climb and then you go downhill, and then in that is a little, kind of like a little dip, inside there. Then you're going up again. And that little dip that's down there, that's where you breathe. So you take a moment to just pull yourself together in preparation for the rebound, in preparation for going up to the next one. So as you're going downhill, you're kind of like, whew, thank goodness, a moment where I'm not pushing through, right? And then as you're down there in the valley, or sometimes it's a plateau for a moment between hills, and you're just like, okay, this is my minute to regroup, and then boom, you're pushing uphill again. That uphill could be presented as a challenge, could be presented as some people want to call it a stumbling block or a hurdle that comes into the path of your journey, and your approach and how you mentally approach climbing through and rising above that moment, that's going to determine the success of you getting up and over and onto the other side. And you can't always see. Listen, do you think if a mile and a half before I got to this corner where the truck sideswiped us, that if I had known a mile beforehand that a truck was going to come down that place and sideswipe us, that I'd have been standing there? Like all things for good reason. I never would have come and met the people at this church, and they wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate in the history of this event and help me out and be of good service and be and do what it is their mission states that they should do for others. So we just never know, and you don't need to know. What you need to do, though, is believe and have faith. Even if you don't believe, you can still have faith that there is a reason why you must continue with your journey. And along the way, those reasons will manifest themselves. Those reasons will make themselves known. And so long as you invest the best version of yourself at any given moment, it was, as what I say, in as-is condition. You know, when you go buy a car and inside the window it says as is, you buying it as is. Okay, that's what you're doing. When I pushed the wagon in 2008, trust me, my as-is condition, honey, I had to refurbish all this as, okay? Because I was in some kind of way. But here I am now, right? And we get to push through and replant our roots in an even more enriching way. So here we are trying this again, and we want to continue to vigil and continue to remember all those. And babe, you were talking about earlier about how many people have crossed this same corner and had accidents in the same exact corner. Like it's a high risk energy. Like the energy in that corner is like, I wasn't the only one that got sideswiped. The lights. I'm gonna hold this for you. I just realized that we left the lights on the van, so let's hope the battery is still working. So babe is gonna go turn it down while I have the light. Just turn it on too to make sure it's still working, right? So we're live, so it's like no like retakes here, right? So we bless all the people here in this community, and we pray for strength, and we pray for awakening, and we pray for wisdom and understanding, and the desire for guidance, and the desire for support, and the desire to love oneself and discover how it is to do that. I mean, the discovery process takes time. Listen, I thought this event was going to take me 14 days. Okay? 14 days, 6 weeks, 5 days. And I was only halfway when I made it to this point right here. 133 miles in, a little over halfway of 250 miles. So don't underestimate your magnificence, no matter how much you have been through. Don't underestimate your magnificence. Even though you may do things and respond in ways that you feel guilty about or ashamed about or confused and conflicted about, none of that can take away from your magnificence unless you permit it to. It's up to you. The ball is in your court. It's your journey. Do you finish? And how do you finish? How you started, yeah, that's important. But how you finish, we all know about how you finish, right? So that's our word, our message of encouragement and enrichment and motivation. These cycles of abuse, especially that remain in families, just like that corner, sometimes the energy just keeps building up and the patterns keep building up and the cycle keeps repeating itself over and over again, and it becomes a high-risk corner or a high-risk family. Right? Because the systemic abuse just keeps the maturation of systemic abuse just keeps evolving itself and revolving itself through generation after generation in the same family. It's like a diet, you know, when your whole family is eating a certain diet, and then they say everybody had diabetes. 10 generations back, we've been dying of diabetes. Well, you know, we've all adopted the former family traditions and the love for the types of foods that might have helped inspire and helped create an environment for diabetes to thrive. Thus, the onset of the same consequential responses to diabetes should occur. This is a natural phenomenon, yeah? So the same thing with traumatic violation. That's why it's so important to unlock your voices.
So important.
So important to unlock and unleash the madness that may be repeating itself to preserve the future generations and begin to reduce the reoccurrence. That reoccurring pattern of traumatic violation in any pattern, in any family.
I know a family
and or community
where child abuse, sexual abuse has gone on through 4 generations.
4.
And primarily it's because each generation, A, doesn't get proper therapy treatment for the victim, and B, because they don't want to get so-and-so in trouble. So it repeats itself.
And unfortunately, it's easier to protect the offender and the abuser than it is to protect the victims.
And you have to remember that, okay, it might be happening right now in this generation, but it's not going to stop. It's going to happen continually in the next one, and the next one, and the next one. If it's in your family, or if you know of a family and that needs an intervention, you owe it to the future generations.
Yes.
If it's happening to you and you'd rather not say anything because you don't want to start trouble, that's okay for you to make that choice for you. But you can't make that choice for your children or your children's children,
nieces and
or your
nephews.
nieces or nephews. If not for your sake, for their sake. Because when abuse, and it doesn't matter if physical abuse, sexual abuse,
domestic violence, verbal abuse, no matter what it is.
Extreme verbal abuse.
Some of it is learned abuse, behavioral patterns that are learned abuse.
Abuse happens over generations because people repeat the patterns that they see. This is the thing about children.
Oftentimes, that's the case.
And you can read up on this again. Children are like sponges.
Yes.
Children absorb what happens around them and what they see. And even if it's not a good thing, I'm sure somebody out there knows somebody that says, I don't want to be anything like my mother. I don't want to be anything like my father. And guess what? You and I both know they are, in a way, exactly.
Exactly. And when they're put in the same set of circumstances that they wish that they had different, they say, well, didn't kill me.
They repeat them.
Is that the worst that you could hope for, is that it didn't kill you? I mean, did you not want better?
They repeat them intentionally or unintentionally. Oftentimes unintentionally.
Unintentionally, because it's a learned behavior. Abuse, in a lot of cases, is a learned behavior because you come so far away from the great-great-grandparents who knew that it was abusive to behave like that. That's why you can hear some people in some cultures and communities will say, well, if this is the case, we all was abused. Well, that's unfortunate that it got that far. And it may be the truth that the majority of the community was abused. That may actually, in fact, be the case. And it's very unfortunate, but that does not mean that we should continue that pattern. That does not mean that we should endorse more of the same. At some point, we have to draw the line and say, it's time to do things differently. It's time to rise above what was and do things differently, learn how to respond differently. And it's a difficult challenge to do, but it is possible. It may take 10 years for a community to reverse the mindset of devastation and destruction, but better 10 years than 100 years more of the same destructive, and by then, 100 years later, you have instead of 75% of a community or 50% of the community, you have 75 to 100% of the community accepting that malfunctioning behavior as normal. This is how we do. That's how it becomes. Well, this is just us. This is how we do. Like I said, the town of Portal. Just like that. This is what they're accustomed to. You can grow used to abuse, and by then it is too serious a problem. And you will have to do, I used to tell my children when they were young, don't learn these things now while the concrete is still liquid, and when people throw the pebbles in or put their hands in or write the wrong thing in, you can, smooth it out while it's still liquid, because once it sets, once that concrete sets and once the information is in there, you have to go in with a jackhammer and a whole lot of extra hardened tools and excavate the whole thing. Some of these communities, that's what needs to happen, because it's gone too far. It's gone too far, and we're at a place in our society where there are many communities that have gone too far with abuse. They got used to abuse, and it's the norm. That's sad. That pain, and knowing that you have to learn, not through teaching, not through repetitive teaching, but repetitive torment. That you have to go, that learning will only be acceptable if you are tormented or mistreated. How some women in these communities won't be with a man that won't mistreat them. Ask yourself that question. Or some men won't be with a woman that won't mistreat them. They're used to abuse. They're used to it. And if you don't do it, it doesn't validate the pain they feel. They're not there to have you validate their worth in aspirations and their desires and their hopes and their dreams and all the great things you're doing. They want you to continue to demoralize them, because demoralization is all they ever knew. So you need to validate that demoralization in order for them to feel alive. That is sad. So when trauma hits you, when trauma sideswipes you in your life, know that your journey is not over, but how you choose to get back on the road and how you choose to push forward. Goldie was brown, okay? Goldie only became Goldie when I had to get off for 4 days and heal up and fix her. I painted her gold from head to toe, because I wanted everyone to know she was still here, and she was even better than she was. Why? Because she got back out there to do it again. She got back out there to finish. And that is the testament of the great spirit of perseverance that is in every survivor. If you lived beyond these traumas, listen, you've already said to everybody that you have the spirit of resilience, that you have the spirit of determination. You're here. You've already said it. Now just rework the wiring in your mind that has you and causes you to believe that this is the best state you can have. That the state you're in is as good as it's going to get. You got to do the work to create better. I had to do the work. We had to do the work. It's like when he had his accident, he had a car accident, and he had to relearn to walk. He had to relearn to do everything. That's the same thing with a traumatic violation. When you have traumatic brain injury, like Babe had traumatic brain injury, we have traumatic brain injury as survivors of traumatic violation. And sometimes you get to that place where there's been so much, some of us are traumatizing ourselves because of the trauma. So we're compounding the trauma by re-traumatizing ourselves during the trauma that we're responding to. It's a vicious cycle. So here we're trying to avoid, coming in touch with our feelings about the trauma. And so we go out there and do things that put us at risk of more trauma. And then that trauma compounds the trauma from the previous traumas, and now you're dealing with that. The fact of the matter is the brain is responding only to that pattern. And to break that cycle, you have to snip the umbilical cord that's connected to the root of trauma. And once you do that, and once you begin to retrain your brain, retrain your mind to think differently about life, and to disconnect from anything that validated the old mindset, once you do that, you are on the road. You're back on the road to restoration. Still got to do a lot of work, still got to get help, therapy, all that good stuff, but you are back on the road, and you are headed in the direction that you desire to grow. So that's our message for all three locations, because our video was not working, our live video was not working. So this was a little extra long because we had to make up for all those other places that had issues. You can come back from addiction. It's always going to be with you. The difference is it active addiction or is it inactive? Like like cancer, or is it in remission, right? So these things are our default response to stress. It's how we cope, and every family has their own set of defaults. Just because you're not doing it doesn't mean that it's something traumatic or something that your brain couldn't handle processing, that you wouldn't do that. So don't stand in false judgment of someone in your family who might be dependent upon some type of addiction. It could be gambling. It could even be something good, like or appearing good, like skiing. But they're addicted to skiing because the adrenaline is still putting in their system the same type of addictive, like skydiving, any at-risk behavior, or skydiving. I got to do it again. I got to do it again. They're chasing that next rush. They're chasing that next high that avoids them having to deal with some of their traumas. So these are all things you just don't know why a person is fixated on a certain type of behavior and avoiding working through and processing the trauma. But let me tell you something. When you're 60 and when you're 70 and life starts to slow down and the people around you are dying, I have witnessed senior after senior after senior relive the trauma as if it were yesterday. And they buried it in work. They buried it in being workaholics. They buried it in being alcoholic. They buried it in dancing. They buried it in all types of activities they thought would help them get over it. But you know what? In the end, it got over on them.
So what she means, just to clarify that, is many years ago, when she was much younger, Rachel worked as a caregiver. It's not as prevalent as it is right now because of different things happening with the Medicaid and the Medicare and the population getting older. The occupation of caregiver is much more prevalent now. But when she was younger, and I was younger too, it still existed, but it wasn't as prevalent. But in either case, she was a caregiver for many elderly people. And what she's referring to is the transitional period when you get older and unfortunately, this is a case, and if you want to research it, you can. As you get closer, at the earliest part of the dying stages, and actually, if there's anybody out there that works in hospice, they can verify some of this for you. As you get to the earliest stages of the death process, and this might be a month out, this might be 3 weeks out, but as you get to the early stages of the death process, you start re-experiencing things from your early life. And if that trauma was not dealt with when you were younger, and it was not processed and dealt with through therapy or whatever your tools may be, as an adult, it comes back to you in your old age. But what happens is you can't control it.
You can't control it.
As a 30 or 40-something-year-old adult, you might say, I'm going to swallow this down, I'm going to keep it down and deal with it and go ahead with my life. But see, once you hit 80, you can't do. It's like trying to hold when you have to go to the bathroom, you have to pee, and you can't hold it. It's like that. You can't hold that down like you could then, and it all comes out, and it's not pretty.
It's not. I remember a woman who. She was very strong, and you always would whisper. She'd cover her mouth and whisper when she would talk about the violations that happened to her. She would talk like this, and she would just, oh, it was so bad, and and she would always talk like that to me about it. It was so hard for her to talk about. When she got older, and this is like 30 years later, I don't believe she's with us anymore, but when she got older, she didn't remember her children. And she mistook one of her sons as one of the people who violated her. And she accused the son of sexually assaulting her, and she deadlocked herself into her apartment. And the fact of the matter is, these things can cause dangerous responses for family later on, where grandparents, and including offenders, because I've met seniors who were predators of children. I remember one in particular who he had Alzheimer's, dementia, and he did not remember, like, I was taking care of him, but he thought I was someone else. He thought I was the little girl that he had violated. And he was telling me to come sit on his lap and licking his lips and kissing, saying, come and give me a little kiss. Just give Pop up a little kiss. All that kind of stuff. And I was taking care of him. He had an erection. This man was 78 years old, but he had dementia. So out of the mouth of your failed memory, he was telling him on himself. So you just don't know how you're going to go out as a senior. So work on these issues while you still have control over the, it's kind of like when I say over control of your bladder. It's like control over the process of your mind. You don't understand? Your functions, of your capacity, exactly. While you still have control over that, work on it, because you'll then create greater vitality in your senior years. So this is very, very important. And I'm talking at this gravesite here. It's very important that you prepare for where you're going, for your departure. And this is where the final purpose, this is where your legacy comes to an end. So I encourage you to encourage other survivors to get on the road through restoration as early and as soon as possible.
For your later self.
If nothing else, for the preservation of your elder self. And then, of course, by default, the rest of your family will also be inspired and motivated by your strength and want to also preserve their family. So, love to everybody. This was our, multi-county, multi-community vigil, leading out of Dublin here and headed into Wickinson.
Wickinson.
Talk to you soon. Love and life to all. Bye-bye.